Hey everyone, miss me? Probably not, but here's a new video. So people are surprised to hear that I'm a huge fan of the original Yugioh Duel Monsters series. I first saw this show on Kids WB in 2002 when it first aired. I recall that Holy Nights, the show that I used to watch in that time slot, had gone into repeat mode, and I only watched Yu-Gi-Oh since it was something new. I never expected to be such a huge fan of the series. So what lured me in? Was it the card games? Not really. While the game is mildly creative, I don't really like card games of this nature, and I feel that the characters randomly have certain cards just so the plot can move the way that it needs to. This doesn't mean I'm not a fan of animes that base their plot around a game. I thought Hikaru no Go was really fun and interesting, and it actually taught you the basics of Go. If you try to learn the basics of Duel Monsters from Yu-Gi-Oh, well, you won't be learning the same. Was it the story? Well, honestly, we don't really know the story until... well, true story, until the end of the first season. And I don't think if there was a prologue in the beginning of the first episode, kids would have probably not have understood why this 4-foot kid turns into an older looking version of himself just to play card games. Plus, the plot kind of has its dips and its dips and its rises. So we don't really find out the true plot until you spend all season 1 figuring out what the plot is, which is to, if you don't know, about this kid named Yugi who solves the Millennium Puzzle. We know that in the beginning, and then throughout the series, there's a spirit that lives in the Millennium Puzzle, and he's trying to unlock the secrets of his past. Simple enough. And the way that that they do this a lot is card games, because the Pharaoh is apparently a master of games. I'll get into more about that later, but with that, so we spent all season 1 figuring this out. We figure out that there's because they even ask a couple questions in this series about the other Yugi. They're like, are there 2 Yugi? And then we continue with this plot throughout most of season 2. We kind of take a detour when the whole Noah and the virtual world show up, and somebody told me who's read all of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga that the Noah arc isn't present, is not present in the manga, which kind of makes sense because they just kind of toss it in the middle of Battle City. It's like, oh yay, we're doing on the blimp, blah blah blah. Oh wait, Noah. Oh yeah, back to the blimp. It's kind of random. I always thought it would have made more sense if they were going to include this plot, that they would have finished Battle City, and then if you've watched Yu-Gi-Oh! When the tower explodes, maybe they get caught in the explosion, and they get transferred into this virtual world, and then they fight Noah. That would have been a good segue, and that would have made sense. But instead, they threw it in there, and it was probably something to do with the ratings. Like, people weren't watching Battle City because it had drug on for so long, so they throw this Noah arc in there so that people would pay attention to it. I really don't know. But honestly, it's kind of dumb when we totally get away from the plot at that point. We get back to Battle City. We're back in the plot now. Then throughout the next season, we're, season 3, we are, we're kind of moving along with the plot. The plot is not really so much based about the Pharaoh as it is our villain, but the Pharaoh is involved. So, I guess, and we have more character development from the Pharaoh because Yugi goes away for a little bit, and whatever. But, so we're still kind of deviating away from the plot, and it doesn't make any sense that we're doing this. And then season 4, oh my god, we totally forget about the plot. We're going back to another card game tournament. This one isn't even interesting. Ugh, I hate season 4. I hate this. Hate. I don't know if that's in the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga or not. I need to figure that out, because if it is, it's not worth reading for me. And then season 5 comes, and we're all about the plot. They make up for all that other bullshit that we've gone through, and we're hitting the plot full force, we're figuring out all this shit, and it's awesome. So, after all this, just by watching it, the first couple episodes, what could a 12-year-old girl find appealing about this show? The boys. Yes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is filled with highly attractive males, my main squeeze being Makora. Now before you troll me, hear me out. I was actually dedicated to watching Yu-Gi-Oh! By like episode 3 or 4, and Bakura hadn't even made a real appearance yet, so shut your mouth. So why do I like this series now? Obviously, I'm not just a fan of it for the boys. I'm much older now. I'm not a fangirl like that. Kinda, maybe. I don't know. I just like Bakura. Most of the fans of the show, I've noticed that I've talked to, like the card game more. Either they got into the card game first, and then they were like, oh, I'll watch the show, or, you know, they watched the show and were like, that's a cool card game, and then they got into the card game, and they really only watched the show to find out new cards and strategies and shit, even though it's not the same game. But as for myself, I really enjoy the story. I think it's an actual, you know, interesting tale. And, you know, like I was talking about earlier, you know, they're trying to figure out the secrets of the Pharaoh's past. And if you're reading the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, and if you're watching Yu-Gi-Oh Season 0, the way that they're doing, you know, they're trying to, like, figure all this out. And at first, Yugi doesn't really have any idea that there's another, you know, there's another him, if you will. They call him Other Yugi for a while. You know, they don't, you know, they're like trying to figure this out. He doesn't really even talk to, the other Yugi for a while either. In, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, of course, we get more of that connection between the two of them. But, apparently, in the original concept, that he's a master of, like, these games, and, you know, whoever loses the game loses their soul, or loses their life, or loses something, you know. And then eventually in the manga, I know that game always becomes Duel Monsters, and they make the plot, you know, around this game, about how it was in Egypt and stuff like that. But, you know, I think that's really interesting. Aside from the actual card game aspect, when we're spending like 7 episodes on one card game, oh my god, please let it end. But like I said, the concept is there, and I really enjoy it, and I think that, you know, maybe if it was carried out differently, it'd be a lot more appealing to more people. But then here comes my plight with Yu-Gi-Oh! If it didn't have as much of the card games in it, or maybe if it included other games besides Duel Monsters, it might not have been picked up by 4Kids, and maybe by Funimation or ADD. Now, why is this a good or a bad thing? Well, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was picked up and dubbed by a company called 4Kids, who also released Pokemon dub, Sonic X, Tokyo Mew Mew, also known as Mew Mew Power in America, and the original One Piece dub. Now, when most companies dub a show, they release an uncut version to the general public, which will contain an English uncut version and a subtitled version, which is obviously uncut. And then an edited version will air on TV. But this uncut version does not exist for Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any of the 4Kids anime dubs, with the exception of One Piece. Now, there were rumors at one time that Funimation was going to dub and release the uncut version, since they released not only the 4Kids edit on TV, but the first 8 episodes subbed and uncut. But I think that idea is stale now. Now, while this may not seem like a big deal to most people, for fans of the series, it is. While the premise of this show is generally the same, they still do change quite a bit. Adding in things like the Shadow Realm to censor out death, and completely changing certain characters' backstories like Malik and Mai to fit an American TV market. And there are countless edits made to Yu-Gi-Oh! Mostly for the violent stuff, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is extremely violent. And I'm not talking about the monster battles, I'm talking about character-on-character battles, when characters are hitting each other, slapping each other, or getting into physical fights, or even when the monsters attack a person, like, you know, when they attack the life points directly, they're attacking the person. Sometimes that stuff's edited out because it might not be appropriate. Now, this is not technically 4Kids' fault. They bought Yu-Gi-Oh! To air it on American TV and be viewed by American children. And American TV standards are different than Japanese. Also, Yu-Gi-Oh!, like most anime, is not meant for kids. Just like in America, how we have Family Guy, King of the Hill, and The Simpsons, most anime for teens is for young adults. So, why would a company buy the show if they knew they had to do all this work and edit out all the blood, guns, and dragon dicks?
Card games.
What?
That is right, card games.
You're serious?
Yes, very.
Airing on Kids WB on Saturday mornings at an 11 a.m. time slot allowed the show to become very popular very quickly. And the merchandise, namely the card game, was out by episode 10. And let's face it, dubbed or subbed, this show is just a long commercial for the card game. Kids and teenagers will beg mom and dad to buy it for them or spend their allowance money on it. So 4Kids' plan worked, regardless of hardcore fans' dislike of the dub of the show. Now, I'm not defending 4Kids on their dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! They could have released they could have released this subversion for the hardcore fans. Oh wait, they did! And nobody bought it. So, if you're one of the people who bitches about Yu-Gi-Oh! Not having a uncut release, and you didn't buy those first 2 volumes, this is your fault. I will blame you on this. I bought those 2 volumes, okay? Because a lot was riding. They released them at the same time. A lot was riding on those 2 volumes. If it didn't do well, they weren't going to release the rest, because why would they, put all this money out to release it if no one was going to buy it? So what I had to end up doing was going on eBay and buying all the bootleg copies of the series so I can get the whole Yu-Gi-Oh! Experience. Now, the only thing I will truly complain about is that all the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Music is changed in the 4Kids version. Even the background music. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had 5 theme and 5 ending songs that were awesome, and they had really nice imagery to go with it. Now, I'm not mad at 4Kids for changing the music. I don't expect kids to really care about Japanese stuff. What we get instead is this kind of creepy orchestral piece with a drum beat over it. And the song is not that bad. It's actually pretty catchy, and most fans I know really aren't enraged at it. Granted, it's nowhere near as good as Warriors or Overlap, but it still gets you ready to watch the show, and even the visuals they use look pretty, even though the visuals they use are... Even in the visuals they use look like they were put together on Windows Movie Maker by an 8th grader. It's still awesome. It's time to do it. So where is Yu-Gi-Oh! Now? In spin-off land. For as far as I could tell, it remained popular until GX aired. When I think the fandom died a little bit for the anime, not for the card game. The card game remained still extremely successful, but I think the fandom for the anime died because it was aired on Cartoon Network instead of WB. But I think the fandom increased when 5Ds came out, and I don't know if what's gonna happen if they even do sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've heard it like 6 different ways. I call it Zexal. Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal. Or it's either Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal or Zeal. I don't care, really. I don't know what's going to happen if that ever comes out. But I think the brand is still as strong as ever. But this part doesn't affect me too much. I'm not a fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-offs because...
Where my niggas at?
Honestly, who would want to watch a cartoon about a bunch of rap artists playing card games? Jack.
You say?
There's something you should know.
What is it you say?
Card games on motorcycles.
It's free!
Now, obviously, I'm a huge fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged. I think it's clever and hilarious, and I hope Little Kuribo can get through the entire series. And I will say, thanks to Little Kuribo, I think that is another reason why the fandom is still growing and is still popular. Without that series, I don't think a lot of people would actually watch, would want to watch Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm also a huge fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0, because that is the Yu-Gi-Oh! That I really liked. That, that's story-driven, and those interesting games. In the first episode of, not the first episode, but in the first chapter of the manga, other Yugi and Ushio play a game where they have to put like a wad of cash on their hand, and then they have to take a dagger and stab through as many of the bills as possible, and they get to keep whatever they stab until the last bill is gone. But of course you don't need to stab your own hand. Could you imagine an entire, like, show based around that game instead of Duel Monsters? How much more exciting would that be? Like, trying to stab things. Like, it could be different things, too. It doesn't have to just be money. It could be, like, anything you want it to be. It could be, like, a sandwich or something, you know? How many slices of bread can you get before you stab your hand? I don't know. I'm just being silly now. But, you know, things like that. I thought that was really cool. They don't really use Duel Monsters too much in Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0. Villains are not really very villainous. The two big villains, of course, that people will remember from this series would be Kaiba and Bakura. But that would be it. Now, even though Yu-Gi-Oh! Is sort of childish, and it may not seem like something I'm into, it really am. And it's not just nostalgia. I find both dub and sub versions hold up for me, mostly because the story is interesting. Now, I'm going to say this again. You're probably going to be like, oh, you're a fan of the dub? Shame on you. On its own, forget there's a subtitle version. Pretend this is an American product right here, the dub version of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's fine. It's a fine show. It's not like a masterpiece, but it's not the worst piece of shit I've ever seen in my life that's American made, and I really don't mind it too much. I actually kind of thank it in a way because it did bring, you know, bigger fandom into Yu-Gi-Oh! So, you know, it does, so people who, you know, complain about it, you have to know that a lot of people got into it via that, you know, that outlet. And without, you know, 4Kids and WB putting it on, people would not have seen it, and we would not have all the fans that we have today. So, I guess check it out if you haven't already seen it. If you've seen the dub, go watch some episodes of the sub. If you've seen the sub, go watch a couple episodes of the dub. Even though I'm pretty sure if you've seen the sub, you've seen the dub, and you probably didn't like it. But you have to admit, there are some pretty funny one-liners in there, and some things that you can laugh at because you're like, oh my god, why did 4Kids do that? So yeah, hopefully it won't take me another year to make a new video. And just so you guys know, I'm kind of sick. I'm getting over a sickness, and that's why my voice is very scratchy, and that's why there's so many edits in this video for me to blow my nose, cough, and drink something. So hopefully see you guys soon.